Radio Free Santa Clarita presents The Talk of Santa Clarita, a podcast about issues involving Santa Clarita and the surrounding valley. Episode 146, Democratic candidate for the California Assembly's 38th District, Kelvin Driscoll. And now, let's see what the Talk of Santa Clarita is.
And remember, this is for posterity, so be honest.
Kelvin Driscoll, welcome to the Talk of Santa Clarita.
Thanks for having me.
I almost called you Kevin.
Yes.
Do you get that a lot?
All the time.
Where does the name Kelvin come from? I mean, are you named after a temperature, or?
I like to think that that's what it is. So I know that there's the temperature,
yeah,
and then there's like Lord Kelvin from like the medieval period.
Right.
But I don't think it's that deep. So my grandfather's name is Calvin.
Okay.
Calvin.
Yeah.
And somehow from my grandfather to my dad's name is Kelvin. So I don't know why my grandfather and grandmother decided to move from Calvin to Kelvin.
Maybe he meant Calvin, but he just had a bad accent.
I don't know.
Kelvin.
And then my dad named me Kelvin,
yeah,
which my middle name is Jaron. Because my mom's...
Jaron?
Yeah.
How do you spell that?
Jaron.
What are the origins of that name?
It's not that deep either. So my mom's name is Jacqueline. Okay. And my mom just wanted me to have the same initials as her. So JD. Okay. And the story goes is that, you know, when they knew, I think they knew they were having a boy, but when my dad see me, he's like, no, like I have to name him Kelvin. Like I have to name him after me. So I'm Kelvin Jaron now. Okay. And then my sisters, I have three sisters, but my younger sisters are Karen and Candace with a K. So.
My wife's name is Karen.
There you go.
Great name.
With a K?
With a K, yes.
Yeah,
there you go. So,
yeah.
Thanks for dressing for the show, by the way. I did the same, because this is me dressed up. You know,
this is me.
Is a tie a normal thing for you? Or
this is a part of the day job. So
what is the day job?
I work currently right now for the Los Angeles County Department of Public Social Services. So
doing what exactly?
I'm a director there. I oversee policy on the single adult side. So the way I like to break up DPSS, because it's huge. So just to scale it, we have about 14,000 employees. We serve 3.5 million customers every year. It's a $4.5 billion.
It's interesting you say customers as opposed to say clients.
Customers, yes, customers. So I say the big four areas for the department are families, single adults, CalFresh, which is what we kind of called our food stamp program here in California, and then we do Medi-Cal eligibility and determination.
I see.
So those are the four big areas. So I work on our single adult side.
Single adults for like homelessness in general? Or?
Right. So I write policy and oversee the homelessness programming for general relief in the County of Los Angeles. Yeah. Which is essentially the welfare program for single adults or individuals who don't have kids. So
well, I want to get into the homeless issue with you.
Me
definitely.
Too.
I used to work for a homeless shelter myself.
I know. On the youth side, right?
For teenagers and stuff. So it's a subject I like to talk about quite a bit.
Me too.
And I find that most people aren't really informed enough about it. You know what I mean? It's raising awareness to it is important. But I want to talk a little bit about you just in general.
Sure.
So where were you born originally?
I was born in Gardena, California, originally. Then lived in Hawthorne for a little bit, and then about the 7th grade, my parents made a very strategic decision for my sisters and I, particularly around education. They really wanted us to be in a good schools, and so we moved out to Lakewood. Where we didn't know anyone. My dad grew up in Compton, California. My mom grew up in Los Angeles, so moved away from their families insofar as 30 minutes,
but still,
is moving away.
It
was a big deal, and my parents were big believers in education, and I think that was as a result of their experiences in education. And so really made it a priority for my sisters and I. And so I grew up in Lakewood, ABC Unified School District.
And then from there, you went to college where?
I went to college at USC.
Got the student loans to prove it?
I have the student loans to prove it, yes.
You and I had to compare notes on just how bad they are.
They are bad. They are bad. But listen, we're still living. I mean, thank God for income-based repayment plans.
Yes.
I think that's a part of how my wife and I deal with it.
I heard, though, that Betsy DeVos wants to get rid of that program.
She does. And they've also gucked it up a little bit so that you actually can't really get the loan forgiveness. And I'm not excited, but I think it's valuable in that they're at least having more conversations about the process and how, it's 10 years of repayment, and then you go to apply for it.
You're talking about if you work for, like yourself, a government organization or a nonprofit for 10 years while making payments until Betsy DeVos came in, you could file to have it dismissed.
Right.
Because you did public service for 10 years.
Right.
And I thought that was a great program because I was hoping to get through it too.
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead.
I think the reporting has showed something like 99% of applications are rejected. People don't actually receive the forgiveness. So
really? Is it that high?
It's really high.
Is that since Betsy DeVos?
I don't know. I can't say that it's since she's been there.
I think it's a fairly new program.
I want to say it was on the tail end of the Obama administration as a part of his plan to reduce student loan debt.
So you went to USC. What did you major in?
Poli-sci major.
Okay.
International relations minor.
Okay.
And then I stayed.
You stayed.
I loved it so much. I stayed.
Couldn't leave college because you were afraid of the real world.
Well, I stayed to do a master's in social work. I did a master's in social work and a master's in public administration. And it was an interesting story because as a poli-sci major, and you know this, the traditional route after that is law school. And I remember doing a semester in Washington, D.C., and I was at an event at the National Governors Association, which ironically my sister now works for. And just being a young sophomore in college, raised my hand like, hey, what are your thoughts on poli-sci majors in law school? And being a sophomore I laugh about it now, it's hilarious, but the presenter, God bless him, I can't remember his name, but he goes, well, do you want to practice law? And I'm like, no. And he's like, then you shouldn't go to law school. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. It really just freed me out.
It's like an epiphany.
Oh, mind blown. I don't need to go to law school. But I knew I always wanted to be involved in policy work in some way. And so found the MSW program when I just thought social workers just took your kids away. That was really all they did. Yeah. Had no idea of the broad nature of what a social work degree really entailed, and was fortunate to get into their community organizing and planning concentration. And I think I call it an indelible moment, I think, in my graduate career was interning for Karen Bass when she was speaker.
I want to ask you about that as well. But first, before we get into all that, why and when did you move to Santa Clarita?
Good. Yeah, love that. I'll talk about that. So we moved here in 2016. Okay. It was right after my wife and I got married.
How old are you? You look young.
Yeah, thank you. 34.
You're young.
Yeah.
You're very young.
Thank you. I love it. I actually, we sent out our pictures on the website, and I saw someone, and they go, oh, you look much younger in person. And I was like, wait, do I look old on the website? What? But so I say it was a convergence of a number of issues. So I grew up in Lakewood, as I shared. My wife, Janice, she grew up in Santa Maria, so Central Coast, kind of San Luis Obispo area. Just gotten married. We knew we wanted to buy a house. And frankly, we were just trying to not make either parent mad about where we ended up living.
Just kind of
it was kind of like we just pulled out a map and was like, okay, what's centrally located? And there were a couple of factors. We hadn't had our daughter Ava yet, but we knew we would, family planning. She would come sometime soon, and having her grandparents involved in her life was very important to us. And so, wanted to find somewhere in the middle. We wanted to buy a home that we could afford. Java and I are both county employees. And, everything else, Stephen, that everyone else thinks is important. Great schools, safe neighborhood. And so it was actually a toss-up between Oxnard and Santa Clarita was kind of where...
I think you made the right choice.
Yes, we do too. We ended up here in Santa Clarita, and that was 2016 is when we moved into our home.
Okay.
Yeah.
You like it out here?
Love it. You look at communities and you realize that buying your home is your first really big investment. Sure. I mean, it's a 30-year commitment. And you're like, oh boy, oh boy. But I think one of the things that has appealed to me is just open space.
Sure.
We got 42 miles of trails here in Santa Clarita. Great schools, good neighborhood, good community. And that's really important. And so we've not turned back. I always tease people because they're, I worked in LA.
Yeah.
Our headquarters is actually in the city of industry, and every time someone finds out where I live, they're like, "Oh my God, like you live in Santa Clarita, like it must take you hours to get here." I'm like, it takes me the same amount of time to get here as it takes you to get here from Long Beach. Because your traffic is like so much more dense. Like our traffic isn't as dense. So growing up in LA, you just get conditioned to be in your car for an hour, and you just know that that's how long it's going to take.
You listen to great podcasts.
Exactly.
Let me ask you a semi-delicate question. As an African American person, living out in Santa Clarita, do you experience any kind of, it is a predominantly white area, and I'm just curious, because I have a friend who is Asian American, and she brought up that she experienced growing up here, experienced a lot of discrimination because of the fact that she was Asian, which to me was like, really? Because I'm a dumb guy from Kentucky, but I'm just wondering, have you experienced anything like that?
Well, Stephen, first of all, I appreciate the question. I think it shows a level of awareness that I certainly appreciate.
But in total honesty, it's sort of like you tread lightly with like, should I even bring it up?
No, we should have these conversations. These are good conversations. The short answer is no. And I think that's because of a couple of reasons, and I appreciate the honesty in the conversation. So my wife, Javane, is half Mexican, half Persian, so her dad is from Iran. I always kid our dog.
So you have
mixed race family.
Mixed race family,
which you certainly see more of, and I've seen more of even in Santa Clarita. But I think with the housing development that's going on, and the fact that this was 2016 when we bought our house. It was $450,000, I think, when we purchased our home then. You start to see communities change and demographics change because this is where housing is affordable. And so it's always comforting to Javane and I when we see families that look like ours. We have a dog. I think his name's Abraham Lincoln, but he's
from a mixed race.
He's a Korean dog.
A Korean dog. Okay.
He's a Korean dog. So, I think, certainly it is a valid question, but I feel like we have experienced, quote unquote, the looks or racist encounters even in the city of LA. So I certainly have not been made to feel uncomfortable. But again, I think that's because of just the dynamics of Santa Clarita is changing. But
I think I think Santa Clarita is kind of going through a real turning point as far as the growth of the city and the way that demographics are changing out here, which is one of the reasons I brought it up. Because it has been a predominantly white area for years, and in fact, a lot of the LA cops are supposed to live out in this area too. So I mean, I was just totally curious about
I love the question.
Okay, well,
I love the question.
Well, give me time. I'll ruin everything.
I know you say you're going to make me mad. I don't think I'm going to get mad. I love good conversation. This is what we have to have.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about you work for Karen Bass.
I was an intern in her office, but yes, nonetheless worked for.
What was she doing? Was she?
She was speaker at the time.
She was speaker
of the state assembly at the time.
Wow, that must have been pretty impressive.
Oh, it was amazing. I had gotten there right at the time of her elevation to speaker, and so you certainly see the dynamics of the office change when. I'm going to screw this up, Stephen. I think she was the 37th Assembly District. I know the numbers have changed now. That's what's ringing in my head. But you see the scope of work change from becoming just a representative of the district to becoming Speaker of the state of California. And I think, for me, Congresswoman Bass is just a gold standard in public service leadership and learned so much and was very fortunate early on to take on a staff capacity as the liaison to her Education Commission at the time. And I think it just really shaped my career in public service, frankly.
Well, obviously she's a Democrat, and you're a Democrat. Have you always been a Democrat? And so why are you a Democrat?
Good question. So I was talking to a group last night. When I registered initially, I registered as no party preference.
Okay.
And that was, I want to say high school. I remember being like a polling worker in high school. And
I don't know what it's about high school kids, but they always want to go home.
We just want to be like,
I'm an independent thinker.
Exactly.
I'm going to be no party preference.
Isn't that like one of the milestones in high school? Is like being independent. And honestly, Stephen, no, I'm not lying to you. I left it there. Like, just left it as, no party preference. Yeah. And recently, I think, it was this year, really thought that it was important as there becomes more ambiguity in kind of no party preference. Like, what do you really think? I thought it was important to really stake my claim and declare my party preferences as Democratic.
Who do you like for president right now?
Oh, I knew that question was coming. So
let me tell you why I'm asking it.
No.
It's a very easy litmus test on where you stand as a Democrat.
Yeah. So I have likes and dislikes and concerns about a number of the candidates.
If you had to vote today, who would you vote for?
It's a toss-up between Klobuchar and Buttigieg.
Really? Mm-hmm. Interesting. So you're more like a moderate, pragmatic, a Democrat kind of thing. Okay, all right.
And can I qualify
sure,
that a little bit?
Go ahead.
So certainly, as a younger candidate running for office, I think there's just an affinity to Pete Buttigieg and his age, and kind of seeing a lot of the energy that was around the Obama campaign. But I also think, being a pragmatist, Amy Klobuchar makes really convincing arguments about her ability to really win this election. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, that is what's most important. And in a lot of these candidate forums and a lot of the questionnaires, we get so many questions, and I think it's particularly defining with this field of candidates, where people don't understand the cross-jurisdictional aspects of government. And so really having someone, who can beat Donald Trump, we also need to take back the Senate, will be really important to a lot of these kind of down policy questions that we get at the state level. And so I've been impressed by Amy Klobuchar's record. I am truly undecided. I think it's important. It's actually fun is the better word now that our primary is in March, because we get to get courted a little bit more, and we get to weigh in a little bit more in the process. Yeah. But yeah, truly undecided there. But depending on their interviews day by day, I'm like, oh, that's good. She scored a point, or he scored a point.
I'm not a Mayor Pete fan, I got to tell you honestly.
Why?
I can't give you anything concrete except that I just get a bad vibe.
A bad vibe?
Yeah.
Why?
He seems a little too perfect.
You think so?
Oh, he's a war vet. He's
it's calculated or something? Like he was planning this?
I don't know. Maybe he intimidates me just because he makes me feel really...
He is a little bit cerebral sometimes, but I get that, and I understand it.
That's what it is.
But I think he's also incredibly articulate. I heard him for the first time. I was telling my wife, it was the first time I'd heard an argument. If you have a chance, take a look at the clip of him on The View with Meghan McCain. Yeah. They're talking about late-term abortions. Yeah. I'm not going to give it away because I want you to go watch it, but he makes a really compelling argument. That's the first time I've ever heard that argument made, and I was like, good job, Pete.
I think it's more about the fact that, I think it was a book in Norwegian that wasn't translated to English, so he learned the language. Man, I don't even like to read subtitles of a movie. That's why I haven't seen Parasite.
I think there are some people, and
it makes me feel lazy. That's what it is.
Even Mayor Garcetti has this. Yeah. Like, that guy's really smart, Rhodes Scholar. I think some people just have that. Like, it's just... Yeah. Just who they are.
We should just get rid of them. Just anybody too smart, they intimidate me.
So, listen, as a candidate, I understand what he's going through. He's going through it probably on a level 10 times greater than I am. So God bless all of them for putting their lives on the line and being vulnerable for the sake of the country.
You're currently running for the 38th Assembly District, Christy Smith's old seat, or still current seat.
Yes.
Let me ask you a question. Have you always planned on entering politics? Or? No. When did you decide you wanted to run for something? For anything?
It's an evolution, and I'm going to try and pack this up pretty quickly. I will tell you that when I finally approached my wife about the idea of running for office, she was like, since I met you, I knew that this day was going to come. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, that's odd. But... So, I shared earlier, intern for Karen Bass, and as a part of my career with the county, prior to coming to DPSS, I was child welfare deputy to Supervisor Hahn. Okay. So I handled all child welfare policy for the supervisor, along with our human services, homelessness, domestic violence. Right. So when Katie announced her resignation, or when she announced her resignation and Chrissy had announced that she was going to run, I just got a couple calls from people who were familiar with my work, and in that kind of conversation of like, where do you live? You live in Santa Clarita? It was like, hey, don't you live in Santa Clarita? And I was like, yeah, like you should really consider running for this seat. And I was reticent. I was like, no, for two reasons. One is, Karen Bass School of Politics, Janice Hahn School of Politics, there is a bench. There's an heir apparent. There's someone who's next. Yeah. They're probably doing the paperwork now. Like they're, Yeah. So the only thing I committed to was just talking to some community leaders. Yeah. And, heard the same refrain over and over again. Like, nope. No, there's no one that
there really wasn't anybody. Now we have three Democrats running.
Yeah, but said it seems like you have great experiences. You certainly understand the interaction between counties and cities and the state and the federal government, and so you should really think about it. But honestly, Stephen, I was reticent, as I said, because I have a 2-year-old daughter, and so I love putting her to bed every night. I love dinner time and having a glass of wine with my wife, every night to kind of just wind down and talk about the day.
So you're a drinker, huh?
You could. There are studies that say a glass of red wine is, so I'm a health nut. Is really what I am.
Way to justify it.
Yeah. And so it was really not a fan of being in Sacramento Monday through Wednesday, kind of coming home on Thursday. That was
Cameron Smythe's one of his big issues because his kids were growing up and he was missing out on so much from being up in Sacramento.
So that's kind of where I was.
Yeah. So what changed?
Saugus, the shooting at Saugus High School. Yeah.
How did it change you?
So I told you I'm a social worker. I have a clinical background. I've worked in the mental health space, and I oversaw child welfare policy for the supervisor. Right. My wife, Javane, is a social worker. She's licensed, and she's in the child welfare space now. Right. And I remember that day, Stephen, and I remember being scared. Like I had never been scared before. My daughter's preschool is about a mile away from Saugus High.
Oh, jeez. And they didn't know at the time.
There you go. Exactly. They didn't know where he was. Yeah. And so my wife called me. Well, we talk every morning about, hey, how was Ava's drop off? Right. How did it go? And you've talked to people on the phone before where you hear a siren and you're like, oh, give me a second. The siren's gonna, pass by. Yeah. Stephen, the sirens never stopped during our entire conversation. And I was like, what is going on? And we didn't know. And she gets home and she finds out what it was. And we're now having to have a conversation about, do you leave to go get our daughter? Do you stay safe where you are? And that feeling just, it's nothing I ever want anyone to experience. And I'm sure it pales in comparison to, what others have gone through in that time period. But what I felt in my gut was that in so much of our politics and in this race, this was going to get federalized. It's kind of what I call the federalization of our race, and that it was going to become a conversation about common sense background checks, restriction of firearms. And those are all good conversations to have. But the truth is that we live in a state that has some of the most restrictive laws around firearms. I was going to ask you,
so what, I mean...
so I wanted to have a conversation about student wellness, about well-being, about...
mental health, essentially.
Yeah. And not necessarily in the way that it's become so shallow in the context of gun violence, right? Like, oh, just mental health. It's just mental health. And I wanted to use my experiences in that space, my experiences at the county, to have a different conversation in Sacramento. And so it was that, in addition to our families being supportive, saying, hey, we can come and stay a couple of nights to help, get Ava to school or, do this, that made it logistically possible for me to be in Sacramento.
When you talk about a conversation and mental health, are you talking about trying to find ways to just preventative to where I don't know what the motivation of that kid was this August, but I mean you do look at all these shootings in general, particularly the school ones, and they're obviously they're for lack of a better way to describe it, it almost seems like they're reaching out in a way of desperation and anger. And are you talking about trying to find answers and clues to? I mean, what kind of mental health are you talking about? I guess.
So good question. And what I say is there are a couple of conversations that we have to have. And what I've appreciated about this campaign is these things thread to other issues.
Sure.
But I think when we're talking about mental health mental hygiene in general, we just have to have a larger conversation in our society around mental health. And I think when you look at figures like Michael Phelps, who are trying to normalize the conversation a lot more. Like, my wife and I are huge proponents of therapy. We both, seek therapy, in therapy. But even the reactions that we've had from some of our own family members are like, is everything okay? Like, are you okay? It's like, yes, that's why we're doing it, because we want to be okay. But I think a part of it is about normalizing mental health and mental hygiene. And I've had, great conversations with Dr. Sharice Moore on the school board here about some of the work that she's doing to really bring up mental health wellness centers in our schools. But I also think that there's a connection to just looking at, when a 15-year-old kid wakes up in the morning and decides that he's going to go shoot his classmates, and then he turns the gun on himself and he shoots himself in the head. That's about a lot more than just restriction to firearms. So often what we see with manifestations like this, and even threading it to some of the substance abuse use, is it's a cry for help. It's exactly what you're saying. It is having no other way to escape whatever might be going on in the home or, at school. And so I really think it's about trying to provide education, trying to help people cope in a way. But I also, I've had a conversation with the Moms Demand Action group here in Santa Clarita.
My wife's a member.
Yes, and I also think it's important to make sure that we're not only highlighting the incidents of mass gun violence, but just everyday gun violence as well too in the conversation. So I wanted to elevate that conversation, and unfortunately, in the number of interviews that we've had, it's not coming up as much as I thought it would, especially here in Santa Clarita. And so I appreciate you giving some space to talk about that.
Just this much space.
That's fine.
That's all I'm going to give.
This is, I think, the second time I've been asked about it in probably 30, 40, 50 interviews at this point. Oh, yeah.
Wait, 50 interviews?
Yeah.
I'm your 50th interview?
Probably.
I wasn't at the top of the list? Get out.
This process has been so compacted. I mean,
you have been kind of thrust into something. Most people spend months, years thinking about even running and then raising the money and going out there. I mean, this has been, how long ago did you actually announce? Thanksgiving. So you've had, 2-3 months at the most.
I think that's longer than we've had. What is this, February?
Yeah.
So January, December, probably about somewhere around 10 weeks, 12 weeks.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah.
Considering, when they in Santa Clarita, they'll announce they're going to run for city council a year before the election.
Absolutely, and you understand why. I mean, to get the infrastructure in place, to get the money in place.
Yeah.
It is one of the things I think is defining of our campaign, is that we have been able to, be at the top of that fundraising list. We have had the ability to get solid infrastructure in place.
Sure.
And I think that's bearing out and it's paying off at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, the big issue here is you're going to, if you win, you're going to be replacing Christy Smith. Now, Christy has been just kick ass as far as accomplishing a lot in the assembly. I mean, regardless of where you stand on her politics, you can't argue the fact that she's gotten a lot of bills through.
I wouldn't.
A lot of things have passed. Okay. So the real question is, I think even Christy would say, 6 months ago she thought she was going to be in the assembly until she termed out.
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, how are you different than Christy as far as like your voting? What would you do differently than what she's been doing?
So I'm going to echo you, because I've had several conversations with the Assemblywoman. She said that she's very impressed with our campaign. She's had good conversations with me about policy issues in the district, and should I be fortunate to be elected to this seat, I'm going to seek her mentorship, because I think her political astuteness in our district.
She is one of the best policy wonks I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, and I don't. I've been listening to the shows, and I've certainly been out with these candidates. I do think that amongst the candidate pool, there's just a general kind of either lack or acknowledgement of how Sacramento works, which is a real dynamic of being an assembly member. I mean, it's you taking your issues from the 38th district up to Sacramento as one of 80, in caucuses, the speaker's priorities, what the governor's office is willing to, and not willing to sign. So to your point, 9 of 11 bills is certainly impressive for a freshman assembly member. And it was why she was named Legislator of the Year. To your question, though, what I will say is, in seeking that mentorship, I don't know that it's so much different because I agree with her on pretty much.
Well, I mean, is there a vote she's made that you would have voted differently?
Yeah, I think here's the distinction because, and you may or may not know this, but the legislature considered 2,600 pieces of legislation in that first session. It's an astronomical number. Right. I think what the difference would be, if there's a difference, is as a member of the school board, I think Christy took education priorities up to Sacramento. Yeah. I think, as the only one in this race, and I think this is another defining factor, as being a policy practitioner, so I've worked in the policy space, but I've also been a practitioner on the homelessness side. Yeah. I think the difference would be homelessness kind of being the space where I feel most at home and starting, in that space. Right. So I think that it would just be a difference of priorities of saying, here's where she started because she knows that space. Right. Here's where I'm starting because I know that space. Well,
let's talk a little bit about homelessness and stuff. And your website had talked about the fact that you had worked with some nonprofits. Which ones have you worked with?
So I worked in South Los Angeles. It's a nonprofit organization called Special Service for Groups. Okay. And I worked in the Homeless Outreach Division. Okay. It's right out of graduate school. Okay. And we actually were able to expand programming as a result of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funding, the ARA funding, that was passed right when the president came into office. Obama, that is. President Obama.
What is the age group that you usually deal with right now? I mean, you say adults, but is it, 18 to 30 usually, or?
So the average age, and I think it's important for our listeners because not many people know this. So GR is the county's, it's actually an unfunded state mandate. So the state tells us that we have to administer the program. They don't tell us how we have to do it. The County of Los Angeles has decided to do it in the form of a cash benefit. Okay. So it's $221 every month to an individual. The average age of the person on GR is 42 years old. 42 years old. And countywide, there are about 80,000 individuals who are on GR every month. And
do you find that... the having worked with the homeless youth in general, the statistic that I was always found most interesting was that you find a situation where between the ages of 18 to 25, that there's a chance to get them out of that loop, that circular loop of homelessness. But once they reach beyond that age point, they're almost doomed to be homeless for the rest of their lives because they're just the age and the habit forming cycle. Yeah, exactly. So
I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. Actually, I was just a part of an effort in our department specifically targeted to transition age youth, 18 to 24, to really look at how we intervene very quickly in the lives of those individuals. Because if you think about someone who's 18 to 24 who's on general relief, that's a pathway that very quickly could lead to just hopelessness. Yeah. And so what we actually did was it was a partnership with Compton College. We targeted the second supervisorial district, and really brought together mental health providers, employers. I was actually really excited about a unique component. We partnered with the Wolf Connection. They're an organization actually in Palmdale. It's a wolf sanctuary that houses about 60 wolves that were rescued. And what they did was kind of our opening event activities. Yeah. But it was a way to really break through to the youth to kind of talk about some of the stories of the wolves, but really think about how to get them on a trajectory to self-sufficiency and economic mobility and a job or education or training being one of the ways that we could really exit them from that pathway. And so I think larger to your point as it relates to transition age youth, and even when we look at homelessness across a number of special populations, so seniors, for example, or families or single adults, I think what we have to do is think about how we tailor solutions to those populations specifically. And it's going to look differently across our systems.
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, an 18 to 24-year-old is thinking, I can work at a Jamba Juice or whatever and go to community college or get my GRE and my GED, excuse me, GRE. But someone who is 65 definitely thinking in different terms. Right. It makes sense. Do you think Well, first of all, can you tell me a little bit about what's going on with, was it Measure H or Triple H?
Yep. I can talk to you about both of them.
Oh, okay. Which one came second? It was
Measure H came second.
See it?
Yes.
The fact that they use the same letter makes it very confusing. So what's
going
on?
One has 3 H's and one has 1 H.
Well, I know that, but if one was called Measure Zinger and the other one's Measure Q, then I would remember better.
Fair point.
Measure H.
Wait, it's going on with Measure H.
Yeah, what is happening there?
Sure. So just for the benefit of people who don't, follow this closely, Measure H was actually passed by the voters in 2016. It's a quarter-cent sales tax on everything in LA County. I'll give you some numbers. So when Measure H was originally conceived, it was projected to produce just about $350 million. People are outspending money, Stephen, and so those projections were a little off. We're now starting to see around $389 million come in from Measure H funding. But I want to put that in context.
Well, it's not that. There seems to be a lot of arguments that a lot of the money is not being appropriated properly. Yeah. That things are being spent on higher levels than they need to be for certain things. I can't remember a specific number, but there was like something about apartment complex being built, and the cost was like some ridiculous amount per unit.
$503,000.
Well, okay, I mean,
so this is a good opportunity to clear up the distinctions between the two measures. So Triple H was a measure, for the city of Los Angeles to build housing.
Okay,
and the 503 number comes from permanent supportive housing, which by and large is more expensive to build. Now, I'm not justifying the number, and I'm not saying that there aren't ways in which we could look to bring that number down. Yeah. But included in that number is staffing costs and 24-hour services and having co-located departments there because it's permanent supportive housing.
Sure.
That's not permanent supportive housing. But Triple H builds housing. Measure H provides money for services.
Services going to nonprofits, correct?
Going to nonprofit organizations, yes.
Okay.
So our biggest investments from Measure H, and these are $100 million investments, are things like shelter. They're things like rental subsidies for rapid rehousing programs, things like services for mental health and substance abuse. So H pays for services, Triple H pays for housing, but only in the city of Los Angeles.
Okay. Yeah, it's on paper at least. When I was reading over the measure itself, it's from Measure H. It was like it's hard to argue that it's a bad idea to give it to nonprofits that are already allocating services and already prepared for it and stuff. Matter of fact, I attended a debate, which is actually where I met Katie Hill for the first time. When she was in charge of PATH, and she was defending Measure H, and there was an opponent to it who was arguing with her, and I actually stood up and asked the question. It's like, Katie Hill is giving you all these stats and numbers and everything like that, and you're telling me you just don't like to read the stats, and that's why you're against this bill. It made no sense.
And so I think that, one, we have to do. I remember the passage the day that it passed. I was working for the supervisor at that point. And I can tell you, Stephen, that one of the sobering comments that I heard at the celebration party came from Sachi Hamai. She's the LA County Chief Executive Officer. And what she said was, she's since retired, but at the time she was Chief Executive Officer. What she said is, let's not let us sit with the gravity of this moment, because we have asked and the public has given us $350 million to solve our homelessness issue. And you better believe that they're going to be looking for results.
Yeah, but I mean,
when they give us that money,
housing homelessness is still going up. I mean, what is the solution to this?
Yeah,
because conservatives will say that the fault of the homeless issue and the fact that it's increasing so high
rests on Democrats.
Is on the Democrats. Yes. And the Democrats have been running the Assembly and the State Senate for they've had a supermajority for years, and we've had this is going to be the third term with a Democratic governor. Yeah. So I mean.
So I would say let's look at the facts, right? And we know that facts are not as popular right now. But when we look at the homelessness number, and you can see this from the 2019 count, that the dynamic was people were falling into homelessness faster than we were housing individuals. And so that's why you see the number grow up. And the reasons that they were falling into homelessness are twofold. right? They can't afford the rent. Rent burdens are overly high, disproportionately high, and wage growth has not caught up with the cost of housing. And so I will tell you that even in our system currently, our nonprofit organizations are doing yeoman's work in reaching out. I mean, there were over 25,000 outreach engagements. But the exit from the homelessness system is a home, right? Yeah, and so this is threaded to the housing, shortage, housing production, affordable housing. And so we can't look at these issues in a silo. And whether or not conservatives want to say, well, the lack of wage growth is also due to Democrats and, the lack of housing is also due to Democrats, it's certainly not helpful to someone who is in a shelter. They don't care. Yeah. They just want to get out of a shelter. And, we had a pilot program between the Department of Public Social Services and the Department of Mental Health, where once individuals are assessed for SSI eligibility, then we connect them for the services. And our director, and I think it was a great pilot, said, I have a sneaking suspicion that if we asked people, do you want to be on SSI or do you want to go to work? They would probably tell us they want to go to work. Yeah. That's what they told us, Stephen. Yeah. They want to go to work. And so you start to think about, it's not necessarily about building more low-income housing. It's about increasing income. Yeah. It's about helping people to, I met with the Carpenters Union as a part of the endorsement process and learned something from them that I've held on to since that meeting. They're talking about mortgage-paying jobs. It's about looking at how we create opportunities for people to have mortgage-paying jobs. And there's so many avenues for that. Yeah. So, who's at fault? Fine, but here are the issues, and here's what people are expecting us to work on.
Okay. The, wow, you stopped so abruptly there.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
I'm curious about a couple of different things. Yeah. For example, immigration. Yeah. We're really taking California's taking a side that is completely against the Trump program. What are your thoughts on that? About the policies that California has versus the United States policies.
Yeah, I certainly think it's been a very divisive conversation. I don't know how helpful that is. Certainly, we see even across our.
Well, let's boil it down a little bit more. Yeah. What do you think about the idea of sanctuary cities?
I think that certainly when you look at our immigration issue, there's work to do. But I don't think that we should devalue the work that immigrants bring to our communities. Okay. I think certainly when you look at the work that our union brothers and sisters do, I think when you look at the work across a lot of our industries, especially in agriculture, those are central to our economy. Yeah. I think that research, I hope, is pretty uncontested at this point. Yeah. And so I like to see it be a conversation more about how we fix what's broken in our immigration system while at the same time still valuing the contributions of immigrants.
Yeah. Okay. The as far as education goes, tell me about what you want to do about that. Is there? You mentioned that was kind of a priority for Christy. Do you have some specific ideas about education that you want to do?
Yeah, so you certainly hear about fully funding our education system and thinking about how we do that. And certainly my space or my time in child welfare, you see the benefits of early care and education from literally the time that someone is born to, I think, what is a changing system right now, even when we look at apprenticeships and job training programs. And, I certainly am appreciative of the work that CLC is doing. But as I said, I've had conversations with some of our school board members, and they're still having conversations about cuts that they're still making. And so there are some, even on this ballot coming up March, November, there are some ballot measures that are on there where you keep seeing kind of fixes to our education system. Schools First is one of those ballot initiatives that seeks to increase taxes on commercial properties. I think ultimately what this means is that we haven't figured out how to stabilize our education funding. And, Stephen, a budget is a statement of our priorities. And I think when it comes to fully funding our education system, we have to have a conversation about fully funding our education system. Not these fixes or these, kind of workarounds, but saying, what is it that we need and when do we make that investment? And I don't want to say that as one member of 80 going, into the assembly, that I'm going to have the fix for how we fully fund our education. I certainly think that it has to be an alignment of the members of the assembly, the speaker, the Senate, and the governor to say, how do we really fix this issue once and for all, and not in a way that, particularly for our district, is as divisive as taxes.
Well, I mean, that was going to be my next question to you. I mean, because there is again, the arguments that a lot would say is that California already is taxed too much. I mean, do you think that's the case? First off, do you think?
I think taxes is not the funnest.
No, but I mean, when you talk about funding for infrastructure, which, particularly with the I want to say the levies and things like that just desperately need to be done. And the expansions of the roads and just on every level, it's got to be paid for somehow.
Right.
So I mean, and so I guess I'm wondering, where is that money going to come from to do some of these things?
Yeah. So I think I appreciate this question. I think it's valid, and it feels valid to say we are a very tax-weary state. I frankly don't think it's really that much innovation to say, well, we'll just tax it, and that's how we'll pay for it.
Yeah.
I do think that when we look at resources in the state, I mean, take tech, for example, right? We really could be thinking about more strategic partnerships. We could be looking at more community benefit types of ideas. There's a reason that the presidential candidates come to California to fund their campaigns, because they know that this is where the money is.
Right.
So in the 5th largest economy in the world, which is California, I'm hopeful and optimistic that there's another way to think about how we fund some of this stuff rather than just taxes. And I don't think that we've tapped into that.
But
I think tech is a space that we could really look at. I think the private sector is a space that we could really look at. I think there are foundations.
You're talking about like grants from
certain grants. I think, looking at how we have, one of the things that I've heard a lot in my education was public-private partnerships. And I remember being really confused about what is that? What does that mean? I think we have lots of opportunities, particularly in the education space. I mean, take the Gates Foundation, for example, and really looking at how they want to revolutionize our education system.
Yeah.
Let's partner with them. Let's do it.
Makes sense. They got the money.
Yeah, exactly. They have the money. They have the will.
So it's
we don't have to. The government doesn't have to do everything, right? Yeah. We can look for strategic partnership opportunities.
So it'd be like when you go to Disneyland and it says Magic Mountain sponsored by Kodak.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, 6th grade sponsored by the Gates Foundation.
Yeah, but I mean, you see that our country, our workforce. Just even the rise in globalization is changing in the way that A, we have to educate our kids, and B, what they're interested in learning.
Let me ask you a question, though. It occurred to me. It's like, I mean, the Gates obviously are very generous with their money and also very supportive of education.
Yeah.
But what if you reach into a situation where, okay, let's say, the Gates say, okay, but we want every computer to be a Windows computer, no Macs. Or we want to teach that in the curriculum, we want this personal thing put in the curriculum. How do you prevent that influence? How do you balance that? To get the funding and not be influenced by what they want specifically in the program.
Yeah, I appreciate the balancing question. Yeah. Certainly, in the supervisor's office, I had a chance to work with a lot of philanthropy that wanted to partner with the county government.
Sure.
They typically don't come at it in that way, so I'm heartened by that. Okay. It's typically around a shared set of goals and values.
Yes, I understand that, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen.
Right, sure.
You know what I mean?
To your Mac question, if they said, well, we want every kid to have a Mac, if I'm staring down the question of the kid having no computer and having a Mac, well, okay, fine. Give them a Mac. I think when it comes to curriculum, for example, I think we have to really look at, and this is what I'm excited about with my candidacy, is looking at a broad stakeholder engagement process, right? Let's look at the merits of what they're proposing as a curriculum, because again, when you're talking about the philanthropic community, there's much more intention behind it than I think we give them credit for, and I don't think it's ill intention. So I think we have to look at the merits of the idea and say, does this place our children in a better position overall for a 21st century economy. Okay. And then we go from there.
I want to ask you about AB 5.
Yeah.
AB 5. I have to.
I know what's coming.
It's probably one of the most controversial bills to come through California in a long time. So
I agree.
What are your thoughts on it? I mean, would you have voted for it?
I knew that question was coming too. I'm going to take that on the back end of what do I think about it.
Okay, what do you think about it? Then tell me how you would have voted for it.
So what I think about it is, and I don't think that this is exclusive to AB 5. I think what we're experiencing now are some of the unintended consequences of policy impacts. And it happens all too often, and I think it's as a result of maybe not as comprehensive of a stakeholder engagement process as there needs to be. Okay. Now, what I can tell you is that I've heard from Democrats and Republicans alike on the impact of AB 5. And so I think it begs us to get back to the table to look at the unintended and the negative impacts of AB 5. I know that the Assemblywoman has introduced in partnership some language to look at nonprofit organizations that work in the art space to kind of make some workarounds around it. And so, I think the intention of the policy was around protection. That's unfortunately not what happened. And I've talked to, certain legislators even in this process of running for office, and it's like, you see a policy one way, 20 minutes, later it's changed in a different way, it goes behind the curtain, and then you're like, whoa, what happened here? So I am speaking very theoretically to say that in this district, when we have a +1, +2 Democratic advantage on the registration, which means we are a truly purple district. I would have really wanted the time to think about and consider the impact to our community members on it, and hopefully have had that impact in the policy-making process.
But now, how would you have voted?
Your fair question is, you still have to vote. I think you have to balance. I probably would have voted for it in the moment, recognizing this is going to be challenging, and we're going to have to figure out how we fix this. Because there's a lot of pressure in those moments. I don't know what was going on, when they were taking that vote. I don't, again, you're considering 2,600 pieces of legislation. And so is there the clarity of that moment to say, no, wait, let's look at all these things? Probably not. It's a lot of pressure. And so what I say is good for community members for becoming engaged and making their voices known. I think it's easy for us to sit here post facto in hindsight being like, you couldn't see this, you couldn't see that, like, why didn't you do this and that, and kind of add commentary on it now. But this is also a part of the legislation process, and I'm glad people are engaged in making their voices heard on this.
You explained to us why you're a Democrat. I'm wondering if there's any Republican ideas or concepts that you support.
So I think business is great. I mean, I think when we think about, and I'm not saying that that's a Democratic or Republican idea, but I had a chance to attend the Santa Clarita Valley Chambers installation gala. It's the first time my wife and I had a chance to attend. But I think you certainly see that there are more Republican kind of lawmakers aligned in that space. Christy was there as well too. We got a chance to talk. But I think about the ways in which trying to make sure business can thrive as having positive impacts across a number of the issues that we deal with. I mean, I certainly think when you look at, back to our homelessness conversation, when you look at cities who have best practices like Houston and Atlanta, who have halved their number of homeless individuals, it's because of their partnership with business. It's because they've, created spaces where business can thrive. Do I think that that's a traditional Republican, or Democratic stance? Maybe, maybe not, depending on where you are. But I think one of the things that's unique about our district is that it truly is purple. And so I think on lots of these things, like Schools First, you certainly have a business interest that you have to balance in how you legislate and how you govern.
Okay. Good answer. All right, we're going to have some fun.
All right, let's have fun.
Okay.
All right.
We have a part
this
of
is the part of the show I like.
Okay, well, this is my kid's question.
I mean, I like the whole show, but this is fun.
Suck up to me.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
My kid Ryan, who's 8 years old, has a sense of humor, and he likes to ask questions.
Yeah.
And so this is his question.
All right.
My dad said your name is a way to measure the temperature. If that's true, what's your boiling point?
Wow, Ryan did not write that question.
That might have helped him a little bit.
What's my boiling point? Like he wants the number?
I don't know. He's a kid.
I'm going to say that my boiling point, for me, really comes with when people don't understand how government actually works.
Okay.
And when they mislead people about what government can actually do for them.
Okay.
Good question, Ryan / Dad. That's
no,
good.
I explain. Here's what happens. I sit down and explain to him who I'm interviewing and everything like that, and I mention your name is also a type of temperature.
Yeah.
And we brainstorm together sometimes on the questions, and that's how that came about.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I have to think about it now.
I was actually explaining to him that different temperature, like Celsius and Fahrenheit and Kelvin, each have different.
I don't even actually know what the boiling point is for Kelvin. I don't even know.
Fahrenheit's 212.
Yeah,
right? But Kelvin, I don't know.
You have to Google.
We'll say 373.
Let's go for it. Sounds good to me.
All right, Star Trek versus Star Wars.
You're gonna hate my answer.
What's that?
Neither.
Really?
Yeah.
Get out.
I know. I just never caught on to.
Have you seen Star Wars? Have you ever watched Star Trek?
I've seen pieces of both.
But you've never watched a Star Trek episode or a Star Wars episode, a Star Wars film. Really? Wow.
No.
Are you even American?
I knew it was coming.
Wow.
I know.
Marvel or DC?
Marvel.
Okay. Who's your favorite superhero?
Iron Man.
Iron Man.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a big Tony Stark guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
What's your favorite movie?
Free Willy.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Because if I wouldn't have done. Okay, so there's a story around this.
Okay.
If I wouldn't have been in the job that I'm in, I wanted to be a trainer at SeaWorld.
Oh, okay.
And then I saw Blackfish, and then that whole thing went out the window.
Changed everything.
Yeah. But yeah, I love that movie.
Free Willy. That's interesting. That's I interned at actually one of my first jobs was interning for the Donners who produced that.
Yeah.
Favorite first concert.
Oh wow. First concert. I didn't really go to many concerts as a kid.
Well, you had to have had a first concert. I mean, everybody has a first time.
I know, but I don't remember what it was. It was probably like, I think it was like a Jingle Ball. I feel like it was one of those concerts where like there was a bunch of artists, they're all together.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I can tell you the most recent concert I went to
was that?
Anita Baker.
How was that?
It was awesome.
Sweet Love.
Oh yeah.
Oh, she's amazing.
Oh my God, and her voice is still. Oh my God.
And everybody talks about Whitney Houston and her voice, but I think Anita Baker can blow her away.
Oh my God, it was. I mean, it's timeless.
Yeah.
It's timeless.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. What's your favorite quote? Do you have a great quote?
Yeah.
What is that?
Oftentimes, people won't remember what you said or what you did, but how you made them feel.
How you made them feel. Okay, well, you're making me feel uncomfortable.
Because of Star Trek? Star Wars, Star Trek.
Get out.
Yeah.
Are you pro-troll or anti-troll?
What do you mean troll? Like
the little dolls with the hair coming up?
Yeah, pro-troll.
You're pro-troll? Really?
Love trolls.
I hate those things.
No. Have you seen the movie? We watch it all the time.
Bambi versus Godzilla. Who would win?
Oh my God, Steven. I don't know. Like, why would they even be next to each other?
Well, it's actually there's a short film where that actually happens. It's a very famous.
I'm gonna go for Bambi.
Bambi, Kill Him with Kindness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm going for Bambi.
Actually, the short film is pretty hysterical because it is Bambi versus Godzilla, and you're like, well, how are they going to do this?
How does it turn out?
And it shows Bambi standing there eating, and then Godzilla's foot just crushes him, and that's the end of the movie. And that's it. It's like all of 20 seconds long.
I'm going for the underdog.
Okay. All right, and let's see. You any tattoos?
I do.
Where are they, and what of?
I have one on my wrist. So I was married before. Don't get your wedding date tattooed on you.
Oh, no. Really?
And then in high school, my nickname was Mr. President because I was like ASB kid.
Yeah.
So don't. My tattoos are so goofy. I have that here, like
Mr.
on my
President
side.
on the side there. Okay. Yeah. You know, you talk about the marriage tattoo, and it makes me think of that joke about. I could see having wife and kids, but a tattoo? So permanent.
Yeah, exactly. So my rule now is only kids' names, if I were to do it again.
All right, okay.
No, you have, God, those years ago. No tattoos. Don't do it.
Give me your best evil villain laugh.
I knew this was coming. So, you ready?
Yes.
Wait, I gotta take a moment for this.
All right. Not bad. And give me a joke.
Yeah.
Give me a joke.
I was ready for this too. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
What do you call a deer with no eyes?
I have no idea.
Yeah, that's the answer. I have no idea. You ready for the second one?
Sure. You got two. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
What do you call a deer with no eyes and no legs?
I don't know what.
I still have no idea.
Oh, it's awful. Awful. Where'd you get those jokes?
One of my mentees.
Oh, perfect.
He used to tell that joke all the time.
When is the primary? Hilarious. When is the date of the primary?
So this is a good distinction. We have a new voting system.
Yeah.
So the primary date is March 3rd, but you can start voting as early as, I think it's February 22nd.
Okay.
So it's about 10, 11 days before the election. So now we're saying vote by March 3rd, not on March 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to know more about you, what is your website?
Yes, Kelvin Driscoll forassembly.com.
Kelvin Driscoll forassembly.com.
Follow us on all of our social media links: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm out there commenting on things, posting pictures, and would love to hear from you. I do actually engage. It is actually me. I talk to people.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yes.
Well, Kelvin, thanks for being on the show. I wish
thank
you much luck in the election.
Sir. I appreciate the opportunity.
I hope to see you again, okay?
Absolutely.
I hope you guys enjoyed the talk.
You've been listening to The Talk of Santa Clarita. Listen to us on iTunes, SoundCloud.com, YouTube, and Stitcher. Barring a life event getting in the way, a new podcast is available every Tuesday. Questions, comments, and show ideas can be sent to thetalkofsantaclarita@gmail.com. You can also call or text us at 661-505-8672. That's 661-505-8672. Follow us on Twitter at The Talk of SC or on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at The Talk of Santa Clarita. You can also visit our website by going to www.thetalkofsantaclarita.com. This has been a production of Radio Free Santa Clarita Incorporated, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. To donate, go to radiofreesantaclarita.org/donate. Radio Free Santa Clarita, on the net and on the air, and we're very much aware.
Any questions?